Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Educational topic, let's do it. First responders of Reddit. What's a devastating situation that you wish more people knew how to handle to avoid less casualties? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. XEMT here. We're talking 13 years ago. It's not a great idea to put the pedal down as soon as the traffic light turns green. Wait a couple extra seconds. That first 2 to 3 seconds when the light turns green is a great time to get nailed by some idiot blowing through a red light. I volunteered on a search and rescue team for several years, and here are a few pretty straightforward things that if people had known may have saved their life. If you fall in swift water, float on your back with your knees slightly bent and feet facing downriver. This lets you push off rocks without breaking your legs or being pulled under. You can use your arms and legs to try to direct your path downstream to avoid obstacles. Avoid crossing areas of rock where the rock slope steadily increases to a cliff or drop. This is common in granite slabs in the Sierra Mountains. Even on pretty gentle slopes, there can be loose gravel, and once you start sliding, it can be extremely hard to stop. So always keep in mind what would happen if you were to slip. When lost in dense woods, it is very easy to wander in circles. To avoid this, line up 3 trees in the line you want to follow. Move to the middle of the 3 trees and then select a new tree, keeping it in line with the others. Keep doing this to navigate in a straight line. You do not need cell service for your smartphone to have GPS or for the compass to work. If you get lost, take note of your GPS coordinates and use the compass to get a sense of your surroundings. Then, turn off your phone and save the battery. Check for cell service if you find a high point. Your phone may still have some maps loaded, so check that as well. You may get lucky and be near a trail or road. If you're stuck outside and getting very cold, you will start to shake pretty violently. This is a good thing and means your body is trying to warm you up. If you start to get tired or feel warmer, even though nothing has changed, do not fall asleep. Do literally whatever it takes to keep yourself awake. If you fall asleep, there's a very low chance you will ever wake up. Along these lines, if you suddenly stop shivering and feel a bit drunk, you may be in the final stages of hypothermia and are in serious trouble. Even warming up may not be enough. Seek medical attention quickly. If you're dealing with someone who has been stabbed or impaled and the item is still inside the body, do not pull it out. Limb amputations. Easy to save someone with a tourniquet. Keep a few in your car. Know how to apply them. It can save you or someone else's life. Tons and tons of blood dumps out of an amputation. How to perform a Heimlich on yourself. You're a goner without a doubt if you're by yourself and food gets too stuck. I see people kind of joke about this whole thing about living alone and choking, but it's dangerous. So yeah, you should definitely learn this. Children choking. Every parent should assume at some point their child will choke on something and know how to handle such situation. I'm not a first responder, but my wife was a trauma nurse, now PACU, and we've found ourselves in some not ideal situations in our travels. Take an AED CPR first aid class. Bonus points for Stop the Bleed, it's often free. That will prep you for the majority of stuff you'll encounter. Have a good first aid kit on hand at home and in your car. I'm not a first responder, but I have a friend who is. He says, stay off train tracks. Don't squish pennies or do photo shoots on them or walk on them at all. Believe it or not, trains can sneak up on you at an alarming speed, and they do not slow down. If you see a snake, just keep a distance and keep calm. Most snakes won't attack you. Probably only anacondas think of you as food, unless you're a little kid who meets a big python. Don't try to pick a snake up. If you get bitten, take a good look at what kind of snake it is. Try to stay calm, get medical help ASAP. Whenever you encounter an emergency situation, stop what you're doing and say to yourself, this is not my emergency. This will hopefully allow you to take a step back and assess the situation and prevent you from making poor split-second decisions. So many people jump into swift water, trying to save someone else, only to become a second victim. Some people quickly try to extricate victims but injure them further, and allow yourself to look at things as objectively as possible, and you'll make much better decisions. One thing a senior supervisor taught me as a crisis social worker: if it feels bad or wrong, trust it. Don't push past it. There's usually a good reason. You intuitively know that. Also, lock up your damn guns. If you lose your child in a crowded area, shout out what they're wearing as well as their names. It makes them much easier to identify to others. If you're swimming in the ocean and you get knocked over and can't tell which way is up, exhale and follow the bubbles. If you ever encounter a heavily burnt person running to you, they always run in the hope to survive. Don't touch them with your bare hands. Your hands might be too hard for their burnt skin and flesh. Always touch them with cloth or towel. Road safety is very underrated, and emergencies are common. Keep your cool. Warn others of a problem with emergency flashers. Stay well off to the side of the road if you must get out of the vehicle. Keep your belt on unless you get out of the vehicle. If you're walking, be aware of your surroundings. Don't get lost in your headphones. Walk against traffic. Stand off to the side of the road if it's narrow and the car is coming. Wear bright, reflective clothing, especially at night. If you are a driver, keep a safe following distance. Slow down in bad weather. Use your emergency flashers liberally for when traffic slows suddenly. Weather is really bad or around a road hazard. Wear your seatbelt. I've seen innumerable people die who would have lived if they had just buckled the F up. Never drive under the influence. I've seen more people die from road incidents than anything else by far. Lifestyle disease not included. A lot of this just sounds like common sense, but in emergency, dangerous situations, it would appear, at least from my fellow drivers on the road, that common sense goes flying out the window. A friend of mine is a police officer in his home city. If your friend is drunk, get them a cab home. Do not leave them to take the train home. He always tells me 90% of the people he get run over by trains are drunks who fall into the train tracks. If you're in a car accident, especially a busy intersection or roadway, don't just get out. If your car is drivable, get it out of the roadway. If it's not drivable, get yourself out of the street ASAP. Can't count how many times I've almost been struck by drivers not paying attention or just not giving a shit and driving fast past accident scenes. My dad was an EMT firefighter, fire investigator, and a police officer. I've learned so much from him, but a few that always stay in my mind are: 1. Always extinguished unattended candles. Unplug unused appliances and unplug Christmas lights when sleeping. Sadly, my dad dealt with a lot of deaths from fire started by these things. If you live in a community with a pool that has a faulty gate or fence around it, raise hell until it is fixed. If you have a pool on your property, do not cut corners and expect a shitty fence to keep people out. Luckily, there are a lot of regulations around pools now, but when apartment complexes started adding pools in, there weren't requirements for gates around them. Dad had a few calls for a missing kid. Noticed the murky pool close by, off season and wasn't being cleaned, and had to drag the pool until he found the child. Even 40 years later, he gets a lump in his throat talking about it, and we were never allowed to even have a small above ground pool. There are still kids today that will wander to a neighbor's pool and not come back out. 3. If there is a fire in your house, there are a few things to know. First, what kind of fire it is and how to put it out. Kitchen grease fire, never put water on it. Put a cover or the pan or pot or throw a towel over it. If there's a fire that you can't put out yourself within 30 seconds, call 911 and get out. Do not start collecting items, grabbing clothes, or continue fighting the fire. A fire will spread very fast and start emitting very toxic smoke immediately. Most fire deaths aren't from skin burns, they are from smoke inhalation. 4. If your house is on fire and it is already out of control, but the room you are in does not have flames, for example, if your kitchen is on fire, but you're upstairs in your bedroom, keep your door closed and exit from the room through a window if possible. If you're exiting the home and can, always close the door or window behind you to starve the fire. There is such thing as a backdraft, and it can be catastrophic. 5. Things to have in your home and your car at all times. First aid kit with tourniquets and plastic wrap, fire extinguisher, glass hammer, seatbelt cutter, and your ID. Learn how to use a tourniquet, trauma wound care, fire extinguisher, and the tools before an accident happen. The Red Cross has lots of educational videos. On your local fire department will always have people on a shift available to teach you if you ask. If something requiring emergency services happens under possibly illegal circumstances, drug overdose, house fire from reckless behavior, car accident when drinking and driving, etc., be honest with the first responders. You will not be the first or last call they ever have with illegal or reckless circumstances. They cannot do their job the best if they do not have all of the information. Not a first responder, but I direct a private security team at location with an open invitation to the public. We see a lot. If it means anything from me, I would encourage first aid, CPR, AED training. In 8 years, I've had to use CPR and AED 11 times. Every time I came on scene, there was a crowd of people doing nothing. No one knew what to do. FA, CPR, AED training is not expensive and can save a life. It's rare that anyone else will be able to step in and do it for you. Be the person that steps in. I'm not a first responder, however I had friends who worked in EMT, and I was trained for first aid and a few other certifications while in school. Always keep a first aid kit and tourniquet in your car. Many close calls. Luckily, only needed it once. Guy ran a red light and I team-boated him. He was uninjured and drove away. However, my leg was cut so badly that if I hadn't used my tourniquet, I would have bled to death. Also, get training for first aid. You never know when you'll need it. It can save your life and other lives in a bad situation. Last thing I'm going to write here is, when you're driving, keep the mindset that everyone is a maniac on the road. It'll keep you prepared to avoid an accident if you need to. If you have to call 911, clearly state your address first and have the operator say it back to you to confirm, and exactly which emergency services you require, regardless if you think you might get in trouble. In college, I was with someone, let's call them Mike, who experienced a horrible mushroom trip, which led them to become violent and completely delusional from reality. He later told us that he thought he entered purgatory, and the only way to escape was to do what he ended up trying to do. Notable information for later, Mike was in great shape and had spent his whole life in martial arts and even lived in Thailand at a Muay Thai gym for a year. Well, one thing led to another, and eventually Mike stabbed themselves in the gut with a serrated 5-inch steak knife to the hilt. It's a long story, and more stuff happened before that, but to stay to the topic of this post, that's all that is necessary to know. They immediately ripped the knife out too, which goes against another comment I saw posted about leaving an object impaled in the victim until proper medical attention can be applied. Key mistake. When I made the 911 call, I only asked for an ambulance. I was also inebriated with several other roommates, and in that moment of panic, I genuinely thought my call would be recorded and could get my friends in legal trouble if I asked for police as well and mentioned over the phone that drugs were involved. It terrifies me still how horrible this could have gone because I wasn't fully honest in the situation. Well, when the ambulance arrived, 4 paramedics entered the house and saw the situation. And to my shock, they immediately walked out when they saw Mike was still violent. Another sober friend was attempting to restrain Mike, as even after his self-inflicted wound, was still trying to hurt himself. We had to wait for police to show up to restrain Mike. It took 6 officers, and Mike even bit one of them on the way outside. Before the first officer entered the house, I pulled him aside and mentioned Mike was out of his mind, and that he was a trained fighter, in the hope the officers would exercise caution. After trying to talk Mike down, and a brief struggle, they carry him outside and handcuffed his wrists to the gurney the first responding paramedics arrived with. Everyone was in such a panic, I vividly remember telling one of the officers they had to manipulate one of Mike's elbows to bend the natural way, because when they initially brought him out on the gurney, Mike became even more violent because his elbow was being bent the wrong way, and the officers, understandably, rushed action to restrain Mike. Everyone seemed to drive off in what seemed like minutes. While waiting for the police to arrive, the paramedics made it clear to me they were not allowed. They used other synonymous terms in our conversation like able, willing, entitled, etc., to use the necessary force to help Mike. I wasn't mad at them. I could tell they wanted to help but couldn't for multiple reasons. Perhaps some of it being red tape bureaucracy put in some precedent event I was never aware of beforehand. Thankfully, the story has a lucky ending. Mike missed everything important, and all it left him with was a small scar under his ribs. He's been able to have other good mushroom experiences after this, and we remain friends today. We even joke around by saying knives ain't shit to lighten the mood on what was arguably the worst days of our lives. Seems like I'm living in a toxic meme of guys will literally do anything except therapy when dealing with trauma. I do not tell this story to sway people for or against drugs. Even the story has far more details that would make this already longer than I intended to post even longer. It is. I hope to inform anyone who might be in any kind of similar situation, anyone who wants to help someone who may not be in the right mindset to help themselves. For example, what if Mike wasn't having a mushroom trip, but sober, and outright attempting suicide, and they didn't want to be saved? The first statement still applies. TL, DR. If the persons you are trying to help are unwilling to help themselves, request both police and paramedics, or any other services you might be needing in their situation. Please be smart and safe out there. Cheers. Good advice, and definitely let them know of everything going on. Probably won't get in that much trouble regardless. And Mike, I'm surprised he went back to mushrooms, but, good on you. Paramedic here, almost 5 years. Don't put your feet up on the passenger dash. Febrile seizures are common in babies. Most of the time, they are completely benign. Still a good idea to call us in case there's another reason why they're seizing. For a new parent, I understand it's terrifying. It's not how high their temp gets, it's how fast it gets there. Don't bundle them up if they have a fever. I know they're cold, but that's just the fever. Give them meds. Seriously, consider how emergent your emergency is before agreeing to have us transport you or your loved one. We can't deny your request for an ambulance, and we really can't say that doesn't warrant an ambulance ride. So just use your best judgment, if you're able to. Grandma feels weak and throwing up. She's probably sick. Take her to the hospital, or better, an urgent care. Don't really need an ambulance for that. Your back has been hurting for a week? Don't really need an ambulance for that. Hurt your ankle in the shower? Don't really need an ambulance for that. You feel lonely because you're old and your kids don't visit or call? Don't really need an ambulance for that. Other people do need one, and you're taking away a valuable resource from them. My city of 350,000 people only has 6 ambulances. Yes, just 6. Don't waste them. Each call can take them up to 2 hours with driving to you, transporting, waiting for a bed, and cleaning. 2-hour window where somebody won't have an ambulance quickly because you have the flu.